So Royce, and I don't bring this up, I actually think this is a great thing. 4 years ago to this month, you were involved in BLM Floyd protests. I'm not accusing. I think it's actually an amazing story of growth. How did you go from that 4 years ago to now where you are the GOP endorsed candidate? Did your views change at all, number one? And number two, or did your views remain the same, or you just realized the power structures were different than how you once viewed them?
Well, I mean, my views didn't change. I would say that before the George Floyd situation, I was more apolitical because my fight with the NBA was more about corporate attitude, right? Corporate culture, a global corporate culture. The NBA is a watering hole for a global corporate community, and professional sports is in general, and so are all of their ancillary partners and sponsors and whatnot, Pfizer being one of them, right? So I was more apolitical. I was like, hey, the money is the problem, and the money is on both sides of the aisle. It would only be after I met Steve Bannon and began to be mentored by him that I would understand just how true money being corrupt on both sides of the aisle actually is. I got a firsthand look at that when the George Floyd protests happened. Now, I was never involved with BLM. In fact, I took a lot of criticism because all the local BLM activists thought it was an outrage that I decided to organize independent demonstrations. Like I had to sort of check in with them or come through this vanguard of local activism. I resented that and took offense to that, one, because I'm from here. And a lot of these BLM activists, a lot of these BLM chapter activists are imported to their local community from some liberal or social sciences department in some university far, far away. Here in Minnesota, it was California. And so I don't have to check in with you guys to organize a demonstration. And I don't agree with your politics. I don't agree that we should defund the police. I don't agree that the police are the sole source of tyranny or oppression in this country. I think the rise of a police state is very dangerous, as we now see with Donald Trump and Steve Bannon. So that was my involvement during the George Floyd situation. And I guess what I saw was the hypocrisy, the contradiction. I saw people trying to highlight Black trans lives matter as a central focus and idea. And I thought it was very offensive. Not only was it offensive, but it was dishonest, because Black trans people should not be the sole focus or central focus of American citizens in American politics. So again, what I discovered during the George Floyd situation is, one, how little your average American citizen knows about politics and geopolitics, but also how the power brokers and the selected leaders are intentionally trying to stifle the conversation so your average citizen doesn't see that broader picture. The George Floyd situation is a unique moment in American history for a number of reasons. One, it was sort of the boiling point or the flashpoint of what had already began a Black Lives Matter movement after Trayvon Martin. One that many Black people had skepticism about even in its inception, mostly because of the activists and the advocates that showed up before the cameras and stood up at the podium and talked about these issues of police brutality, but never really wanted to discuss the issue of Black on Black crime in the community, which is a huge issue. And so, there was always a sort of local skepticism of Black Lives Matter as an organization. Another reason being because of the women who founded it and their agenda being so obviously skewed towards the LGBTQ. And also with George Floyd, you got to remember that it was just after lockdowns and the pandemic. So there were a lot of people who were already dealing with a sort of, I'd say, a sort of secluded, uncertain, anxious, fearful time in their life. All of us were. None of us knew what to really think of the pandemic when it first hit en masse. Some people had an inclination, but en masse, everybody was kind of uncertain. So all of that took place and I only bring that up and try and paint that picture because there were a lot of people, I know for a fact, that were out there in the streets protesting, not necessarily about police brutality or about George Floyd or about racism or about anything specific. They just had this intuition that something's not right, and they felt the need to rebel and lash out against the system. And the Marxists and the communists do a great job of absorbing the grievance of anybody who has one. That's their modus operandi, right? We'll take on anybody's grievance for the most part. doesn't really matter much to us. As long as we can destroy America in the process, have at it, join in, join the band. And so I say that again because they were able to absorb a lot of the momentum from a lot of things happening in the country at that time. Going forward, people have begun to see the duplicity. And it's not just people like me, because I was always skeptical of Black Lives Matter because I grew up in the community. I know these people aren't actually from the community. But your average white liberal, I think as well, and people who voted Democrat their whole life, people who are cultural Democrats who voted Democrat just because they happen to be black and their grandmother or grandfather was a Democrat. All of these people are now starting to question the fundamental tenets of the platform. And people like me, I think, are doing a good job of articulating what their focus should be as American citizens. Citizenship. I mean, the whole root of this identity politics thing is that your individual identity, whether it be grievance or otherwise, should transcend or supersede your American identity. That makes no sense whatsoever. And it's just completely illogical. It would ensure that you don't have a country and that you don't have any rights guaranteed to you. So I'm not even quite sure how they think they can continue that scam, but people are waking up to it. And you can't recreate or reproduce what happened with George Floyd, because every time the mainstream media uses a situation like that to lie or push their own agenda, large groups of people are going to start to wake up all at once and figure out that they're lying. They're not really that good at lying. That's part of the problem. I saw somebody say the other day online, anybody who supports Donald Trump is a white supremacist. That would include me, a black candidate. And these are the sort of contradictions and illogic that are going to crumble the narrative of this Democrat Party, of this liberal movement, of this entire globalist agenda. The logic isn't there. And I think that's going to pay dividends for Donald Trump across the country with the black community. It already has begun. Donald Trump is the first Republican presidential candidate I've seen in my lifetime be polling ahead of a Democrat presidential candidate with black men. And black men are already saying, listen, we get it. The boogeyman of the KKK and white supremacy, we get it. But we don't want to keep sending our money to Ukraine, and there's this whole shift of worldview that I think black men are undergoing, where it's, how long do you think you're going to keep scaring us with the KKK? I mean, you get to a point where it's so obviously a racket. White liberal women, they tell me that the cops are the KKK. They tell me the KKK are afoot, and then they tell me to give up my Second Amendment rights, so I need to call the cops when the KKK show up. It's ridiculous. It's illogical. And you're going to send my money to a Ukrainian regime that proudly flies KKK symbolism and icons. We're not going for it anymore. We're done with the Democrats. We're done with the LGBTQ transgender stripper shows. We're done getting our antibiotics from the CCP. These things are easy enough to disseminate to black voters, and they're starting to wake up to it all at once, and the Democrats are panicking.
Yeah, and so I want to just final on that point. I believe that the LGBTQ2I plus agenda is a loser in black America. It's one of the reasons why black Americans are trending right wing. Final thoughts, Royce White. Do you agree with that?
100%. 100%. There is no group of black people that I ever grew up with in the neighborhood that would be okay with telling a young man that he could cut his genitals off and become a woman, or to push that on him at a grade school. Many black mothers, single black mothers that they try and buy off with welfare, are so upset with that agenda. And some of them don't even know about it yet. When everybody wakes up to what's going on in that school, the black voters are going to leave in mass exodus.
Let's understand that the strippers for kids, the LGBT stuff, it is what we call a luxury belief. The poorer you get, the less likely you are to support the LGBTQ2I plus agenda. The richer you are and the whiter you are, the more likely you are. Again, that's not a perfect fit. I'm successful and white, and I think that stuff is nonsense. However, it is an entry point to win over black voters in a way that we never have before. They hate when white Democrats, black voters hate when white Democrats push things upon them. How can people support you, Royce White?
You can go to roycewhite.us. That's our campaign website. We need smash mouth populism, American nationalism, and ultra MAGA warriors to go to the United States Senate. And I can't wait to get there and represent the American people.
I love it. Royce, you are a great American, and we're behind you, and we hope you have great success in Minnesota. I would love to see that political revolution continue in Minnesota. By the way, latest poll shows Trump up in Minnesota. which means you have a shot in the general election if you're able to do it. Royce, come back anytime. Thanks so much.
Thanks, brother. Godspeed.